and usually with even less credit being given to them for what they accomplished. Most of the organizations subsist on less than $10,000 a year in revenue. The other piece of research we did for this report was we did focus groups with hard-to-reach youth in several countries. The primary finding of this focus group that I want to share with you today is that young people universally are extraordinarily frustrated, you can say even angry, by the failure of the international community, including international organizations like mine and the United Nations system, for talking so much about youth leadership and youth as drivers of change, but not actually integrating young people in any of the processes that determine their future. So with that as a little bit of backdrop to my own life, my organization, and the issue, what's going on this today, I want to bring Victor into the conversation. And Victor, I know a fair amount about you, but I'm really honored to be able to let this crowd know a bit about you as well. First, tell us, where did you grow up?
Oh, thank you very much. And again, thank you so much. I am very happy to be here. I'm from Uganda. I was born and raised in northern Uganda. Thank you so much. And growing up in northern Uganda, when I was a child, I was born in conflict. I spent my first 20 years as a child in war. So when you talk about war, I grew up in the camp. Camp life is my life. I did not study it, I did not read it, I did not research it, but I lived it. But as a child, if there was any country that I knew, even when I was going through the hardship of war, it was South Africa. And you may ask me why. Because during the time when you guys were struggling against apartheid regime, we had musicians from South Africa, Lucky Dube, Yvonne Chaka Chaka, doing so much about freedom, about justice, and we knew this country just like I knew my own country. But growing up as a child in war, just like the dust, I did not allow the war to destroy me. I rose, and I'm here today.
So, can I ask you, growing up that way, what actually tipped the scale for you? What turned you towards the decision to dedicate your life towards peace building?
I think one thing that I reached a point when I was a child, growing up without food, spending 7 years taking 1 meal a day as a child, but also surviving being abducted, being killed, seeing my friends being taken as child soldiers, and all these kind of things. I reached a point where I was sick and tired of my own suffering. But when I asked myself, how long can this continue before we see opportunity for education? How long can this continue before we don't run every day for our lives? And I asked myself, where am I in the picture of solution? And I reached a point of saying, at the age of 13 years, the first thing I did, I formed a peace club while I was living in the camp, primarily to mobilize my fellow youth and children to reject and resist temptation for recruitment into any armed forces, and we campaigned against child soldiers recruitment in my community.
And where are you now?
Right now, I'm in South Africa, first of all, in Johannesburg.
I deserve that, fair enough.
And most importantly, being in South Africa today is not only good, it is special. It's a very special opportunity to be here today. I can't appreciate enough the elders for allowing us as young people struggling in our different communities to allow us hang on their shoulders, to learn to lead with integrity, to learn to lead with humility. This is what makes you unique, our elders, and we hope we shall not let you down, just like we promised before you and before Mandela, we should be smiling down upon us that we shall not let the light go off. We shall continue the long walk to freedom, and I think right now in our space of work, we do think we have a responsibility to make Africa a continent of peace. We have a responsibility to make Africa a continent called home so that none of us as young Africans die trying to escape from the continent, but we stay home, we prosper, we progress, and we make our home livable.
Let me ask you, Victor, and I'm talking through the applause because I want to get as much out of Victor before time runs out here. So one of the things that we've seen in most of the places where we work is that violent groups, whether they're gangs or cartels or cults or religiously inspired extremist movements, their appeal to youth is quite intoxicating. They treat youth as potential heroes. They treat them as essential fighters in a cosmic struggle bigger than themselves. And many of the efforts to encourage or support youth in another direction treat them as victims, as marginalized people. You need us. Whereas the extremist groups say, we need you. You can be heroic. And the juxtaposition is so clear everywhere. Where have you seen this call to peaceful engagement and building society and resisting the allure of violence? Where have you seen it most effective, and what are the key ingredients?
I think the most important thing, first of all, you have to realize that nothing is more difficult than to be a victim and a champion of human rights abuse at the same time. It's the most difficult thing to balance between how can you stay calm when you are being prosecuted, when you're being kicked, when you're being denied opportunity. And that's the question that I still ask myself, how possible would the Mandelas and the people in South Africa would go through so much, but they still remain peaceful? So when I was a child, I asked myself, if I seek a community that is peaceful and just, what can I do? Am I going to pick up the gun to fight? Am I going to kill somebody? But the fact that I was surviving every single day, that meant that every next hour I was alive was a special hour to me. It was no longer a matter of next month, not a matter of next year, but a matter of the next hours. I treated every moment as a special opportunity for me to think differently and bring change in my community. But what is also very important that we have to realize is, as young people, there's that anger, especially in Africa. Majority of the young Africans are generations of lifetime anger. They've been going through the fatigue of despair. They want change in their life, but they're asking, who can give us change? And there's that strong urge to strike back, but we're saying, we cannot destroy if we want to get there. The time has come that we should learn from the elders, learn from the history that everybody else worked to build. They have stopped, and we take it forward, as opposed to destroying it. So I think it's important to communicate to the young people in the spirit that they want, but most importantly, young people need a voice. We come forward. Sometimes we have to step forward and present our case. I guess if it was not without our elders, probably a walk like this could have not been so peaceful. But when we walk together with our elders, our leaders come forward to guide us, to give us the wisdom, and we stand, we appreciate, we celebrate humanity and the continent. I think we can walk forward together in peace, and that's what we should be doing as young people.
So, excellent. I was talking to my colleague who's here among us, Judy Kimamo, who runs Search for Common Grounds programs in Kenya. She told me a story that just perfectly crystallizes the approach that we see so many governments taking to young people. She said that each district in Kenya was asked to come up with their 5-year plan for budgeting. And on the youth side of the plan, one of the districts, Nyeri, if I got it correct, had 3 top priorities. The first was to build polytechnics, vocational schools. The second was sporting venues, football pitches. The third, tear gas, in terms of the level of budgets. And we're seeing in many of our conversations with governments, to be honest, behind closed doors, that many of them are scared of their own youth populations.
Yeah.
They don't know how to engage. They're scared of them. The world is changing so fast. Can you help us understand, whether you're speaking to young activists like yourself or government leaders or the elders who are talking to the top leaders in the world, what steps would you like to see? Any concrete steps you would like them to take that you think might help to reduce that fear and encourage government leaders to take young people more seriously as partners and not as a threat?
I think, thank you very much. I think most importantly, we have to realize that change has come. Time for change has come. Whether we like it or not, we have to cope up with change. How do we embrace change? But the point is, how can we influence the pace of change towards peace and justice and inclusion, as opposed to destruction and hatred and all these kind of things? Now, what I know, as young people, we need to step forward. Step with love. How can I tell power the truth, but I tell with love and respect? That is most important. And I think when we come and we present our case as young people, we ask our leaders, our elders, our brothers and sisters, help us, embrace us, include us. And of course, I would still make appeal to the current leadership that understand that the time of change will always not wait. It will come and it will go at the right time. But also, young people should understand we step forward to influence the pace of change to the direction of peace and justice. And I would appeal to our elders that help us to prevent conflict, guide us through the processes. There's nothing that can make Africa much better than prevention. If we could prevent war, if we could prevent hatred, we could build and reconcile our communities, Congo would be at peace, South Sudan would be at peace, Mali would be at peace. And why are we being regarded as young people who are destroyers and fighters? We are the agents of peace, not assets for war, not assets for destruction, but we are tools for justice, and we should stand up for justice and freedom.
Excellent. Victor, I want to end with one question for you. You know, well, I have the privilege of engaging with a lot of young people around the world, and they oftentimes ask me, oh, how can I get into this kind of work? And I think many young people looking at you will think, oh, I would love to be like him, but you seem very far away where you've attained. And the first thing that I tell young people to consider is to surround themselves with people, before they go out into the world and do all the change, try to surround themselves with people who will support this in them, who will keep them up when they're depressed, and will keep them level-headed when maybe they get a little full of themselves, because this work is very hard. In our last few seconds, can you just talk a little bit about what your own support network has been like, to help relate for the young people who are watching, you know, get some inspiration that you weren't always this incredibly articulate and powerful, or maybe you always were, the person that you are today?
I think most importantly, let us understand, like we planted the trees yesterday with the support of Mama and the elders, let us be like trees. When you grow bigger, we become beautiful and, you know, beautiful green leaves and branches and all that. But where we are rooted is important. There's no better place than we can place our root than at home, than in Africa, than in our countries, than in our society. I think as young people, we should deepen our root in the society, work for transformation at a grassroots level. If we come together as people who are concerned and passionate about the continent, I think we shall work forward what is important. And that's when we shall blossom and deliver the trees of justice. And maybe today we are here being planted as seeds of peace in South Africa, but we are going to grow with the support of our elders. We'll become trees of peacemakers. Soon we are going to be forests of peacemakers. And in future, we are going to produce seeds of peace and justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
thank you.
Thank you. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you. Thank you. Peace certainly is the end goal. I'd now like to welcome two brilliant women leaders. Mary Robinson is a member of the Elders, former president of Ireland and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She has dedicated her life to lifting the voices of the most vulnerable. She had a warm, the sun in my face. Ooh. All right. She had a warm working relationship with Madiba. You are.
Okay.
All right. And our president, Mama. Thank you. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Thank you, thank you.
Madam President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, an African treasure, the first female president of Liberia. She brought her country out from civil war to a growing and vibrant state with a positive future. Joining the two magnificent women leaders is Dr. Raj Panjabi, founder and CEO of Last Mile Health, one of the 100 sparks of hope. A Liberian who left when war broke out and returned as soon as it became possible. Dr. Raj founded Last Mile Health to bring primary health care to every Liberian, no matter how far they were from clinics and hospital. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may begin the conversation.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be moderating this discussion where we will have a focus on health and a particular focus on Liberia. And I don't need to introduce them anyway. There have been introductions, this wonderful Madam President. But Raj, I didn't know you very well, but you were born in Monrovia. Tell us about how you grew up, what you did, and how you returned to your country.
Well, thank you, and it's such an honor to be on stage with two leaders I admire so much. I was born in Monrovia. My parents had migrated from India to Liberia in the 70s. And I had the kind of life any child would dream of, really. I loved science, math. I wasn't the most athletic kid, but I loved football. And then things changed. In 1989, civil war erupted in our home country, and it sent hundreds of thousands of people fleeing, along with my family. We moved to Freetown, were evacuated there, and then eventually I made it to the U.S., where my family was lucky enough to be taken in and given another chance. I had the chance to go to medical school, and I just couldn't forget the place I'd grown up that had given me so much. It shaped who I was.
Where did you go to medical school?
I went to school at Chapel Hill in North Carolina.
Yeah.
University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Okay.
And then I was 24, and you know, we had been evacuated, leaving people behind on the tarmac when the rebels had captured the only international airport. And you know, when you're 9 years old, and I imagine people here can relate to this, you may not know why things happen, but you can have a sense of right and wrong. And it had always stuck with me why those people were left behind on the airfield when my family had the chance to be evacuated.
So you came back.
And I decided to come back. And thankfully to President Sirleaf, when she was elected, it allowed many of us who had lived outside of the country to come back and try to take part in the rebuilding under her vision.
And just tell us what it was like to be at the inauguration of President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Well, I had the chance to attend her public inauguration. The official one was done earlier that day. But wow, you know, our conflict lasted 15 years and left us a quarter million of our people were killed, and it destroyed the infrastructure. We had no electricity in our capital. So imagine that night President Sirleaf had her public inauguration to be with the people. And she had about 30 guards around her. There was no electricity in the football stadium where she was being inaugurated. And so you can imagine how far behind we had come with just 15 years of war and how much work had to be done to recover.
Madam President, Ellen, tell us, first of all, with a focus on health, what it was like to try to build up
told that's a young man who is in one of the most rural of villages who's doing things. I said, who is he and why is he here and why would he select a place that's so far away where there's no infrastructure? How can he possibly serve under those conditions? And then I found out it was Raj. And he had selected to go into one of the remote villages to be able to promote the training of workers, of health workers.
Were you a doctor at the time or a student?
I was still a medical student.
Okay.
And I had come back and President Sirleaf's government had discovered that there were only 51 doctors left in the country for 4 million people. It would be like Johannesburg having 11 or 12 doctors to serve the entire city. So there was a big need in rural areas.
Okay, back to
I mean, he carried on his activity. I met him 1 or 2 times. We met in some fundraising for his program, for his extraordinary service to our country. And then Ebola hit.
Yes.
A disease, a terrifying disease, that we had no capacity to respond. Our health system broke down because we had not prepared for infection control, particularly on this order. It was a strange disease. We've never had it. We know malaria. We know all the conventional type of diseases, but this one was strange.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was well played all over the world, but we shifted our emphasis from a militant approach initially to a community-driven approach in which we gave responsibilities to the citizens to save their own lives and livelihoods, and in that way we conquered the disease. But we knew that what we had to do since we don't have enough doctors in the country, or nurses, or health practitioners, what do we do? Following the fact that our communities responded so well to our appeal for them to take charge. And that's where we all decided, well, look, we're going to have to do it. And then Raj came again and presented a program of, well, what we have to do is to train the health workers,
Yes.
community health workers, who would become first responders.
Well, Raj, tell your side of that project. How did you work this up? What did you put to Madam President?
Well, you know, first of all, for those who may not know who a community health worker is, you know, we had a chance to meet one together last year, President Sirleaf and I did, a woman named Grace, 30 years old, and she lives in a community 6 hours from the nearest clinic in the middle of Liberia's rainforest. This is a community that had never in its entire 100-year history had healthcare workers or access. A community health worker is someone like her, 10th grade educated, who is trained in a few weeks by a nurse, hired, given a job, and then equipped with a smartphone and some medicines to provide daily health care to her neighbors. So if a mother in Grace's community is worried her child is sick with malaria, it's Grace who comes to the doorstep to provide treatment on the spot. So, you know, as Madam President so wonderfully articulated, it was the Graces of our country who stepped up to work with doctors and nurses during the Ebola epidemic to go door to door and hunt down the virus and stop it in its tracks. So Madam President had this vision to say, how can we get healthcare within reach of every last child and family to both address the Ebola epidemic, but also the everyday epidemic of premature death in our country and lots of other rural parts. So we worked together with her Ministry of Health and now continuing with President Weah's Ministry of Health.
And had you started your last mile health at that stage?
Well, we had been working, you know, we started very humbly. My wife and I raised $6,000 from our wedding. Wasn't the most romantic, or maybe it was the most romantic thing we did. And we had trained about 300 workers alongside President Sirleaf's government. But her remit was to say, how do you actually be bolder? I believe in you.
Yeah.
Those are words she said to many of us.
And how old were you when she said, I believe in you?
I think I was just above 30 years old. I don't think I was that much older than that.
But she believed in you because she'd seen what you've been doing too.
I think so.
Yes, yes.
We believed in your vision. We believed in the effort you'd already taken. We believed in your spirit of service to humanity and to our country. And so we said, well, we've got to, what do you want to do? Community health workers, let's do it.
Yeah.
I think Professor Paul Farmer came in.
That's right.
He worked with you.
Paul, he's a terrific man.
Right.
Wonderful man.
And so we decided, look, before I left office, I said, I'd like to see at least 4,000 health workers.
And how many were there when you said that?
300.
But
About 300.
About 300.
Yeah.
So you wanted 4,000 before
We
you
wanted
left.
4,000.
And what was the time scale?
The time scale was in 5 years. They should have 4,000 trained
Okay.
working in rural villages all across the country.
And when in that time scale would you have stepped down?
Yes.
When? About
a year and a half
About a year and a
into it.
half.
So you want, yeah.
And now I don't know where we are. I mean, I'm not there to follow through as much. So Raj, where are we?
Well, we're at 3,500 workers now in the country.
3,500.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And importantly, they're all rural Liberians.
And where are you in the 5 years?
So, and this was amazing. You know, President Sirleaf has been known to say, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And she, at the Ministry of Health, we had a plan to go from 300 to 600 in the second year to about 900 in the third year. And she said, that's not bold enough. Dream bigger.
Yeah.
And so she said, I want to see 2,000 by the time I leave office in in January
Yeah.
of
And you have
about a year and-
3,500 by then.
and now there's, well, and we exceeded the target because she asked us to dream
Yeah.
harder, bigger. And it's exciting because the results have been spectacular.
Yeah.
The children, there's a 50% increase in children receiving malaria treatment, where before they had nothing. There's a doubling of the women who are now delivering their babies in the safety of clinics rather than on dirt floors. And importantly, again, one of the primary factors being epidemics, 20% of all the infectious disease triggers in the country, where the next Ebola might come from, are identified by these workers. So, we're so grateful for Madam President's leadership, and I know President Robinson, you and the elders have really been advocating and trying to support other governments to try to do something similar.
Yes, we're very keen on health being accessible for all. We think that that is not only important for countries for their health, it's also good for the economy. And I'm really fascinated by the way in which the last mile health has developed in a number of countries, and I think you've been involved in trying to, even beyond Liberia, trying to work on, the importance of getting the extension workers, the community workers. And I know the current head of the World Health Organization, because of his experience in Ethiopia, Tedros, whom I've known for a long time as health minister there, and then he went on to be foreign minister, and now he's head of the WHO. He understands. Tell us how last mile health is progressing to get a real understanding of the importance of health workers for a country like Liberia, but more than Liberia.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important opportunity is to pay these workers. The science, I teach medicine now back in Boston as well at Harvard Medical School, and we're always talking about the science. And so the science is really spectacular here. So if we as a global community were to hire, train, and equip our own citizens in rural areas to perform 30 proven medical services, from prenatal care to vaccinations to malaria treatment, we could collectively save 30 million lives by 2030. 30 services can save 30 million lives by 2030, but we can't do that if we keep these workers as volunteers.
And a lot of them are women.
And a lot of them are women. So asking women from poor communities primarily to work for free is both unequal and unjust.
Yeah.
But
So tell us about the WHO and paid workers.
So Dr. Tedros and the World Health Organization, which started a fantastic program in Ethiopia, hiring some 45,000 health extension workers, like the community health workers that President Sirleaf and President Weah have led in Liberia. He knows this is critical. So the WHO is now looking at actually recommending to the world that these workers go from being volunteers to being formalized and paid. South Africa has 70,000 community health workers, I understand. And there's an opportunity to invest in them.
And these are jobs, especially and importantly if they're paid. And they're worthwhile jobs because they're serving your community. They're fulfilling jobs. How many community health workers in your scheme are paid?
If you're talking about the national health system, all of them are on government payroll. They are public servants.
Yeah.
This program was a special program. Let me also say that the silver lining to this dreadful disease is that we were forced to revamp our entire health system.
Yes.
Forced to be able to establish triage with all of our hospitals and clinics, also to pay better our health workers. This program has just been a spark. You call it spark of hope?
Spark of hope.
Yes. This was a real spark of hope that, again, brought us to realize this. So today we have a National Institute of Health that has been established to be able to do the research on the effect of the disease. So it just goes to say, some small innovation, some catalytic thing can move a whole system forward and have it achieve much more beyond what its normal trend is.
And tell me a little about an audacious moment on Necker Island that I think Richard Branson had something to do with.
Well, you're right. Africa alone needs about 2 million community health workers to close the gap. The African Union's actually made a commitment to try to make that happen. We're trying to do our part it's Richard's birthday, as everyone heard, but he actually gave a gift to, he along with 5 other philanthropists on his birthday last year, to help hire, train, and equip 50,000 community health workers from Liberia, Uganda, and Kenya have started to take advantage of that philanthropic commitment.
Yeah.
And we're hoping to work with 2 additional countries. So, thank you.
Yes, yeah. And
thank you.
I think that's a wonderful story. And the great thing about it is it's a story about jobs, and jobs for women and men, but jobs for community health workers, which will help the economy of the country. One of our elders, Ernesto Zedillo, as an economist, has advised the elders, this is not just about the health of a country, it's about the economy and the progress of the country, because if your people are getting access to healthcare, they are healthier, they are motivated, they are productive, they are entrepreneurial, it makes such a difference. And we are out of time.
Oh, already?
Already.
Okay.
Thank you. Could we have a round of applause for these wonderful people?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, former presidents. What a great conversation. Thank you. Are you guys still here? Nisa Pelele. Marangboni Dulezi empty at the back. What's going on? What's going on? Are you tweeting? Are you taking selfies? Remember, we're creating this Mandela mosaic. So I want you to take selfies, tweet. The hashtag is hashtag walk together. Hashtag Mandela 100. All right. Now, I also, before I call on the next panel, have a surprise for you. Who would you like to hear sing today? Let's see. Huh? I heard someone say something. Yes, freshly ground. They're coming. They're coming. All right. The next panel, Walk Together, for hashtag Justice for All, is a brilliant and broad topic. Here to help us understand how using and shaping the law is a grassroots challenge and an opportunity. Please welcome Danny Srikandaraja. I hope I said it right. Right?
Perfect.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes.
She's so glamorous.
Danny is the Secretary General of Civicus, the World Alliance for Citizen Participation and a Walk Together campaign partner. Danny will moderate this conversation. The first participant is Vivek Maru, the CEO of Namati, a grassroots and now very global legal empowerment network and a brilliant spark of hope and partner for the hashtag Walk Together campaign. The bold goal of their work is to obtain access to justice for the 4 billion people who currently live without the protection of the law, purely because the system locks them out from accessing their human rights. They're joined by Indonesian Spark of Hope Haka, represented by its founder, Fariza Farhan.
Small.
Sister, we know you've traveled all the way to be here in Joburg, and we thank you for that. Come through. Yes. Fariza's organization is a Spark of Hope, fighting for the protection of the Lusa ecosystem, one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, threatened by human activity, poor legal protection, and a weak governance. Welcome the panel on stage.
Thank you very much,
Are you ready?
Andile.
Awesome. Hey.
We're here to talk about justice, and I just want to recognize how special a place we are in today. If ever there was a piece of earth where we can talk about access to justice, this is it. On this site, we have had the imprisonment of heroes like Madiba, Oliver Tambo, Joe Slovo, just over there, Winnie Mandela, Albertina Sisulu, people who fought for rights, our rights, who are key members of the struggle for freedom in this country and for the world. Mahatma Gandhi down here. And all of them had in common this one thing, which is that they fought for justice, for access to justice for each of us to live as equals in this world. And I'm here with two amazing justice fighters of today who are going to talk to us about today's struggles around the world, in Indonesia and around the world. And Fariza, if I can start with you. Not many people here will know much about Haka, the organization that you've helped start, or Indonesia. Tell us, what are you doing?
Hi, my name is Wiza. I come from Indonesia. Some of you who don't know, it's a country between Australia and Malaysia and Singapore and Thailand. So there's a huge sprawl of islands, 280 million people. Indonesia is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. We have a lot of protected area, but often that protected area is only protected on paper. So I work in a place called the Loisa ecosystem. It is the last place on Earth that still have rhino, tiger, elephant, and orangutan roaming together in the wild. I know I've seen rhino and elephant and lion in Africa, but you guys don't have orangutan. Let's admit it. So the work that I do is mostly working closely with community so they could have meaningful involvement in shaping policy in regard to conservation, protection, and restoration. Because for us, we have a very sensitive landscape in Sumatra. If we clear our forests, it's not going to be long before we have landslides and floods. And those who are in the front line of conservation are often the victim of this natural man-made disaster. And sometimes community doesn't have a say on what happened to their forests. And that's what we're trying to change.
Okay. And you're a spark of hope. Tell us about what gives you hope. How do you fight these struggles day in, day out?
Grassroots leaders are my biggest spark of hope. For me, being involved in engaging in on daily basis with people who are on the ground, who are keep pushing and fighting, regardless of how insignificant the battle might seem, but they show an example that change could happen on the smallest level, and with a whole lot of us, it become on a big level. Someone who sit in, like, oh my God, I got stage fright, seriously. I feel so inspired sitting here in front of all exceptional global leaders and global thought leaders. But then again, for me, the biggest inspiration also being on the ground to meet with the community leaders, people who continue fighting and pushing every day.
Fantastic. That's very inspiring. Vivek, you're an expert in access to justice. What exactly is access to justice?
I don't know about expert, but our starting point is law. Law is supposed to be the language we use to translate dreams about justice into living institutions that hold us together. Law is supposed to be the difference between a society ruled by the most powerful and one that honors the dignity of everyone, strong or weak. But that is not the world we live in. The UN estimates that 4 billion people live outside the protection of the law. That means they can be driven from their lands, they can be intimidated by violence, they can be excluded from society. I'll give you an example of somebody I met in September. I'm going to see him next week. His name is Mahmoud Ratib. Mahmoud's from Nairobi. He's 57 years old. 1985, he lost his ID card. Not a big deal. For most Kenyans or most people around the world, not a big deal. It takes you 2 weeks, you apply, you get a new one. Mahmoud, though, is one of 5 million people in Kenya who faces a discriminatory vetting process when trying to obtain a national ID card. It is like the Jim Crow South in the United States, or a bit like apartheid, where if you are from a certain set of tribes, most of them Muslim, you get sent to a different line. And so Mahmoud got bounced from office to office. He got asked for documents he didn't have. He got asked for bribes he couldn't pay. Finally, he gave up, and he had to stop working. He was a truck driver. He had to stop working. He was dependent on his wife, who was a beautician, for 29 years. Wow. 29 years. It's like going to prison for something you didn't commit. He said, without an ID, you have nothing. You have nothing in your life. And there are billions of people like Mahmoud who lack basic access to justice. So what would it take to change that? Lawyers are the ones traditionally who have this responsibility of giving people access to the law. I'm a lawyer myself. Some of my best friends are lawyers. But we have limits. The lawyers are expensive, first of all, and we tend to focus on formal court channels that are impractical for a lot of the problems people face. So lawyers are crucial in closing the justice gap, but you can't leave it to lawyers alone. And Faruiza mentioned grassroots leaders. Community legal workers, which are similar for law to what Raj was describing for health, can be a bridge. They demystify law, break it down into simple terms, and then they help people find a solution. They don't focus on the courts alone. They look everywhere, an ombudsman's office, ministry departments, local government. So Mahmoud found a community paralegal named Hassan Abdul. And Hassan explained to Mahmoud how vetting works. He helped him to gather documents to make his case, helped him go before the vetting committee. Finally, Mahmoud got an ID card in 2014, and he was able to start working again. Now he carries not just his national ID card, he carries a whole deck of ID cards. He's got his voter ID, he's got his driver's license, he's got his political party ID. He said, I feel like a Kenyan now. And that is the power of what legal empowerment and access to justice can do.
So another reason I find this space inspiring is, you know, on this very site of injustice, we have behind us the Constitutional Court of South Africa, which represents to me how significant an institutional change happened in this country towards justice. What you've described are stories of individual empowerment. How do we shift the power when it comes to the system and get systemic change?
Yeah, it's a really important question because there are billions of people like Mahmoud. Community paralegals track data on every single case they handle, and when you put those stories together of individual cases, it gives you a portrait of how a system is working in practice. And that is oftentimes information that nobody else has. And you can use that information to argue for changes to systems, for improvements to laws and policies. So in Kenya, paralegals from the different communities who face discrimination are tracking data on how long it takes, when bribes are requested, what kinds of documents are requested, and we are using that data to argue that vetting is unconstitutional. And so that is the bigger goal, is not just to get one person ID or 2 people or 3,000 people in ID, but to overcome that entire discriminatory system.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask one last question before we go to both of you, which is, you know, we're here, we're trying to fight for justice, justice for all. When we leave here, what's the one thing you think we should all do? What is the one thing we can start doing or stop doing to fight, to build access to justice around the world? Fawiza?
People like one thing question, right? There's always like, what is the one solution for climate change? What is the one
With 1 minute and 25 seconds to go.
Okay, well, I guess for me the most practical thing that all of us could do is to follow Madiba's word. Essentially, when you see injustice, you stand up. You be brave, you be strong.
Thank you. Vivek?
This tradition of community paralegals that I'm describing actually started here in South Africa. This is the origin story. Community paralegals go back in South Africa to the 1950s. They used to help people navigate the rules of apartheid. And the one thing that I would encourage people to consider here in South Africa and elsewhere is to ask governments to make this basic question of access to justice, of basic legal support for ordinary people, make it a public priority. It's something that rich countries and poor countries alike have tended to ignore, and we need to change that. We need to change those norms so that it's something that a government owes its people.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Look, I hope you've got a sense, a taste of what this year has been about, and the Walk Together campaign, the Sparks of Hope campaign. If you want to know more about these two guys, please look up their details on the Sparks of Hope website. But perhaps the most important lesson for all of us here in this special, special place, or even if you're watching from afar, is that this struggle for justice for all continues, and the power is in our hands to deliver that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys.
Danny, oh, always an inspiration. Vivek.
Yes. Sing before we leave.
Yeah, I know your mic is closed. Nobody heard you. Let's give them another round of applause. Young people, it is possible. These are young people, shakers and movers in their communities. And I hope that these conversations are really inspiring you so that when you go back, Elokshin, we need you. You're the spark of hope. You don't wait for anybody to tell you. You get inspired. There's leaders here whose work you've seen. And so we walk in those footsteps. And Utatu Madiba has already laid the track. So we follow, we do that, and we become those sparks of hope in our communities. All right. It is now my privilege and honor to introduce Mr. Kofi Annan, Chair of the Elders, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and former Secretary General of the United Nations, to make his remarks and to offer thanks from the elders to all of the people around the world, and especially here, who have made this Walk Together movement, not campaign, a success. Let's give him a huge round of applause. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, good. Dear friends, what a wonderful day we've had. A wonderful few days, I should say. On behalf of my fellow elders, I wish to tell you how happy we are to be here and to thank you for being part of the movement, for working together, and for celebrating our 100 Sparks of Hope. These courageous individuals and groups from civil society across the globe have the life, honor the life and the legacy of Nelson Mandela in all the work they do for peace, justice, health, and equality. In their different ways, they are all continuing his long walk to freedom. It is not an easy path. There are often stones underfoot, obstacles ahead, diversions, and temptations to take an easier route. As President Obama said so powerfully yesterday, our world is at crossroads. There are powerful voices urging us to follow another path, a narrow way that may at first seem straightforward and easy, but which leads to resentment, division, scapegoats, conflict, and misery. Today you have shown that you reject the siren songs for strong men and their small hearts. You have embraced hope, compassion, and most importantly, solidarity. Every athlete knows that the key to success is not just individual effort, but our teamwork, support, and dedication. Collectively, we are the sum of our parts. We are a movement, and when we speak with one voice, our call for justice cannot be ignored. First and foremost, I want to thank you, the people of Johannesburg, for making us feel so welcome, for joining our events and sharing our messages. Thank you to the Mayor of Johannesburg, Mayor Herman Masheba and his team, to Brian Maduka and his team at Johannesburg Parks, and all other civic bodies that helped in innumerable ways. We are grateful for the friendship and cooperation of Selo Hatang and all the Nelson Mandela Foundation. We wish to thank our campaign partners, Civicus, Global Citizen, Africans Rising, Namati, the Fight Inequality Alliance, the Health for All Coalition, and the wonderful year of work that we've done together. These have been fantastic, and incredible networks have been established, which, as Grasa said, we hope will move on forward and it doesn't end today. The networks should continue to spread the stories of Sparks of Hope, and we have helped today to make it a wonderful and a successful movement. I hope all of you here and watching online will continue to work together with us and with one another as we work for a world that would make Madiba's spirit sing. And finally, in keeping with the theme of today, I am proud to ask our brother, Jay Naidu, who has exemplified moral leadership for many years, to make the final remarks today. Jay, please come up and have your way.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you. Bless you. Okay. There's a surprise happening here.
They've recruited me.
So I'll let Uzo do this. Uzo, come on.
Okay, so wow, well, I've been asked to come up here to do one thing. This is kind of a change to the program, so forgive us. But we're a group of young people called the New Now, who are really dedicated to working with young folks, but really also taking an example from those who have come before. So what we wanted to do was very quickly to call up the elders that are with us just up to the stage very quickly so we can thank them for their example. So if you wouldn't mind coming, we would very much enjoy.
Thank you.
Sorry, so we just had to hijack it for 1 second. Is your mic on?
No.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
So if you'll just give us 1 second while we're waiting. The other thing that we really wanted to do, it's a bit of a surprise, but we'll take 1 second to do that.
Wow, he's so young.
Good to see you.
Hello. So good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just wanted to quickly bring you up here just to let you know how important your examples have been to us as a group of young people who are trying to follow in your footsteps. We know that it's not easy to lead and that it's not easy to lead for so many years, but to see you here with us, with all of the young people out here in the audience, it's a really amazing thing, and so we thank you greatly and hope that we can live up to the examples that you have set. So thank you. But we also wanted to very quickly do one other thing, which is a bit of a surprise. There's someone who has a birthday today. We all know Madiba has a birthday today, but we also know that Mr. Richard Branson has a birthday today. So we were going to sing him happy birthday very quickly. So on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Richard. Happy birthday to you. Thank you very much.
2.4 million a year. These were kids on drugs, gangs. How did we do it? Conscious development.
And we just again want to say
it's the inner lights. It's the inner lights.
All right.
Yeah, it's
okay.
yeah. And I think one of the things that we want to emphasize is that your leadership has meant so much to us as a young African woman from the Gambia, from a small village. People like me don't make it this far. And we have an opportunity to stand on your shoulders. So what we're asking is, you've supported us to get this far, and we are asking for that support to continue. The concept of young leadership is on everyone's minds, and everyone keeps talking about it. But what does that really mean? As young leaders, we don't want to be treated as the naive generation that's just out there. We want to be seen as leaders, and we want to be taken seriously. We want to be respected. Because a lot of us do what we do by putting our lives on the line, following your footsteps, following Madiba's footsteps. So we just want to, again, thank you for your courage and knowing that we are following that footsteps, but we can't do it without your support.
And also maybe another thing is you have demonstrated to the world that when you talk about engaging young people, it's not just talk. You mean it. Thank you very much.
We will be there for you. And let me repeat, you are never too young to lead.
Yes.
So we keep going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
You're not saying
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're great.
Thank you.
Wow.
Bahasa Indonesianya mantap sekali.
Wow, 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 wow.
Thank you.
It's
And,
powerful when young people want to thank their elders while they live. Thank you so much, guys. And I'm sure this message and this sentiment also goes for all the leaders that are sitting here, even though they're not a part of the elders. Tatumbeg, Mtwana kaphinda ngene. We know what you guys do for us in this country. We love you. And Job Mamukrasa said, want to hear more. Young people are gripped by drugs, sexual violence, and all these things. But it's the same young people who are going to liberate us. So this that just happened here also applies to all of you. Thank you. Now, equally broad and complex is the widening inequality gap from fighting economic inequality to ensuring we have the right to love whomever we want, whenever we want, to finding innovative ways to ensure access to education for all, and to enshrine the equal rights of women and their reproductive rights. This agenda must be the toughest and most critical if we are to leave no one behind. To discuss the topic, #WalkTogether, #Fight Inequality, Closing the Chasm, please welcome our moderator, Uzo Iwela, who was here just now. Come up, Uzo, a medical doctor, author, filmmaker, fellow activist, and now also CEO of the Africa Center in New York. A huge round of applause. Hey, baby. Awesome. Uzo is joined by renowned FGM activists from the Gambia, Jaha Dukure, I hope I'm saying this properly, whose organization, Safe Hands for Girls, is a spark of hope. And from right here in Joburg, whoo, you guys are gonna make a noise, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? I'll tell you some more now. Please welcome Dr. Teddy Blecher.
Is he from here?
Hey.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And those are your kids, the Maharishi Institute. Uzo, take over.
That's so nice.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow. Wow.
Yes, baby.
You guys didn't do that for me, and I came from Nigeria. That's right. You're my homies over there. Thank you. I love you. We're gonna talk a little bit today.
One, two. One.
Right. Thank you very much.
A lot about sort of inequality from the economic perspective, and we talk about fixes. But I think what you
President
do is
Sirleaf,
really
thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Clearly quite a very important day today. There's a walk that took place here to make that commitment once again to continue Madiba's long walk. What does it mean for you to be back in South Africa on this centenary?
Please repeat. Let me say how glad I am to be here, but let me ask you to repeat the last thing because there was so much noise in my ear.
No problem. President Sirleaf, how important is it for you to be here today as we mark what would have been Madiba's 100th birthday?
Let me say I'm extremely pleased to be here, to just be a part of the 100th anniversary of the global icon that we all revere so much, and to be able to be a part of the program of the elders who are doing so much across the world to promote peace and justice, and to be a part of the young people's program. I've had a chance to interact with some of them, exchange views with them, listen to all their successes and their dreams and their challenges. And it's just been, for me, a wonderful 2 days.
President Sirleaf, you delivered the Nelson Mandela Lecture in 2008. You've got quite a lot to say about governance, transparency, and a host of other things that Madiba stood for. Where do you think is the African continent today we fare as leaders, as
Africa has done very well just in the past decade to be able to promote democracy, to be able to have regular peaceful transfer of power. But in today's world, we're now beginning to wonder, where do we go? Because we get a lot of protectionism, a lot of insulation in many countries. Will that also affect Africa? Will we see a reversal of Africa's own commitment to what President Nelson Mandela stands for? Will we see a return of the big men of Africa, something that he spoke against, his interests being embedded in the people and the people taking charge of their own destiny? So we don't know, but I think Africa has come a long way. We just hope that all our leaders will make sure there will be no reversals.
President Sirleaf, we tend to see quite a lot of that. I would tend to agree with you on that aspect. What do you then think we need to do to revive part of that spirit of Nelson Mandela to ensure that those gains are not reversed? Those are gains that were made over a very long time, which all of a sudden may seem to be eroded over a very short period of time.
I think if we all listen to President Obama on yesterday, he put out a challenge to each and every one of us who believe in Africa, who believe in global solidarity and global peace, that we each can do our part. We each can show in our own way, in our homes, in our organizations, in our parties, in our churches. We can all show that we believe in what President Mandela stood for by showing examples, by reaching out, by taking positions whenever that's necessary, by standing out in the interests of all the ideas for which he stood.
President Sirleaf, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ambassador, is there any chance, President Sirleaf, that you might be able to join us for our primetime program this evening? I know it's rather short notice, Ambassador, but is there any possibility that we could have President Sirleaf in our studio this evening?
Then we will develop great entrepreneurs, business leaders, and everything else.
That's a program. That's interview tomorrow morning at the hotel.
Yes, that's correct. This evening, these are different programs. We have 18 radio stations and about 5 of our television network.
What time are you talking about?
What for people looking to change their positions, what do you think is the most important thing they need to know about themselves?
We have other programs. I don't know, madam.
I think it's important to know yourself and believe in yourself. If you don't,
so that's why we squeeze you in today.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you, President Sirleaf. Thank you. Thank you so much.
A lot of times when I wake up in the morning and I say that I want to I've learned so much, and also finding people that have something in common with you, people that are trying to reach a similar destination, because I think that helps as well.
To move things forward.
Exactly.
And now Taddy, well, first of all, thank you for that. I wasn't expecting that. Now, Taddy, we only have a few more minutes to go, but when you look at what are the biggest challenges you think young people are facing, what would you say? Just the two things that you think we most need to tackle in order to make things work.
The first thing is access to opportunity, because young people have got the potential. So if you can connect them with opportunities, they will truly grab it with both hands. And we've seen that. I mean, our students come 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 5 years, 44 weeks a year. Wow. They never get tired. They never stop. They're always there. They always do it. They do. We should clap for them. And by the way, our staff do the same and even more, because they're there when the students come, and they're there even when the students leave.
So hands up for the staff.
So thank you to the staff. So Give young people access. They will grab it and they will amaze you and they will do miracles.
Yeah.
And the second thing is treat every human being as a human being. It's
Yeah.
about humanity. You're not just a number. Don't put somebody in a classroom and just teach them mathematics or statistics or medicine or anything else. A person's a body, mind, and soul. And you develop that whole person and you will see the miracles you want to see. Help a young person find their life purpose. Know who they are, where they're going, what they want to achieve with their life. Then no army can stop them.
Yeah.
Once a young person is awake inside, they can do absolutely anything. So those two things.
I'll clap for that. Now, Jaha, the last word. That's right, man. I got you. All right. So one more question, though, Jaha. The last word before we go. What are the two things that give you the most hope that we can actually solve these issues of inequality?
I think it's people like you and I when we talk about the Africa that we want. I mean, I think like every time I see you, one of the things that we talk about is the white savior mentality. At least there's a new generation of Africans that don't believe in that, that want to lead their own issues.
Yeah.
We don't think it's the responsibility of the West to come and save us. We think we are more than capable, and we are tired of people telling us that we are corrupt and somehow we can't lead our own issues.
Totally true.
So for me, what gives me hope is you in the audience. Your ability to stand up and say, this is our Africa, and we are going to end some of these practices, whether it's female genital mutilation, whether it's child marriage, whatever the issues are, but it's that younger generation of Africa that is taking the lead in every step.
I think you guys have heard it all. And there isn't very much more to say. So with that note, I want to thank you, Jaha, and thank you, Tadi. And most of all, we want to thank all of you guys out there. So, you know, never stop believing, as they've said, and